Sathyabama Institute of Science and Technology.
Very good day, everyone. Myself, Preetha Wilma Dawson, Assistant Professor, College of Physiotherapy, Sathyabama Institute of Science and Technology, deemed to be a university. In today's session, we are going to start with middle ear. Middle ear is also known as tympanic cavity or tympanum. It is a hair-filled irregular cavity which is present in the temporal bone, and it lies between the tympanic membrane and the medial wall. The medial wall is formed by the base of cochlea, and the medial wall contains two windows. The first one is oval window and the other one is round window. Next, we'll discuss about tympanic membrane. Tympanic membrane is a semi-transparent membrane which is fixed in the tympanic sulcus. So, this separates the middle ear from the external acoustic meatus, which is the part of external ear, and the tympanic membrane is covered by the layer of skin on the lateral aspect, and it is covered by the epithelial layer of cell on the medial aspect. So, the total surface area of tympanic membrane is 80 mm square, but the effective vibrating area is of about 55 mm square. This tympanic membrane is convex medially. The highest point of convexity is called as umbo. The mandiburum of the malleus bone will be getting attached to this structure which is called as umbo. So now we will discuss about the functions of tympanic membrane. This membrane vibrates in response to any sound stimulus. So the cessation of this vibration will occur immediately after the sound stimulus is getting disappeared. So we have a picture representation of this structure umbo, which is the highest point of convexity in the tympanic membrane. Now we'll discuss about the structures in the middle ear. There are three structures in the middle ear that are auditory ossicles, auditory muscles, and the eustachian tube. You have a picture representation about auditory ossicles and the muscles, and along with that we have the eustachian tube present here. First, we'll start with auditory ossicles. The auditory ossicles are the three miniature bones which is extending across the middle ear from the tympanic membrane to the oval window. So, there are three auditory ossicles, namely malleus, incus, and stapes. First, we'll start with malleus. So, malleus is also known as hammer. It consists of three parts, the head and the mandiburum. This mandiburum is also known as handle, and we have the neck is a connecting structure between the head and the handle. So, and also this head of the malleus is getting attached to the incus, and this mandiburum, which is also known as handle, will be getting attached to the structure which is called as umbo, which is the highest point of convexity in the tympanic membrane. Next, we'll discuss about incus. Incus is also known as anvil. It looks very similar to the premolar tooth. It has a body, one long process and one short process. The tip of the long process has a knob-like structure which is called as lenticular process, and this articulates with the next ossicle which is called as stapes. Next comes the stapes. The stapes is also called as stirrup. It is the smallest bone of the body. When compared to all the other bones, this bone is a very smallest bone in our body. So it has a foot plate which is also known as base, and it has two limbs or two crus. One is anterior crus or posterior crus, and also has a head and neck. Next, we'll start with auditory muscles. Mainly, we have two auditory muscles. The first muscle is called as tensor tympani, and the other one is called as stapedius. First, we'll start with tensor tympani. The very important function of this tensor tympani muscle is to pull and keep the tympanic membrane in constant stretch. So this is very essential for the transmission of sound wave. So when there is a paralysis of this muscle, that is the tensor tympani muscle, it leads to hearing impairment. The major function of the stapedius muscle is to prevent excessive movement of the stapes. So this muscle is getting attached to the neck of the stapes. On contraction, this muscle will pull the neck of the stapes in order to reduce the movement of foot plate against the cochlea. So, when there is a paralysis of this muscle, what happens? There will be hyperreaction of these ossicles, which will be leading to a condition which is called as hyperacusis. So, paralysis of stapedius muscle most commonly occurs during facial nerve lesion. So, we have a picture representation about tensor tympani. It is getting connected to the tympanic membrane, which maintains tension of the tympanic membrane constantly. And next comes the stapedius muscle. This stapedius muscle is getting attached to the neck of the stapes bone in order to reduce the movement of the foot plate against the cochlea. Next, we'll discuss about the last structure of the middle ear, that is the eustachian tube. This eustachian tube is also called as auditory tube or pharyngotympanic tube. It is not a circular canal, it is a flattened canal which is extending from the anterior wall of the middle ear to the nasopharynx, which is the posterior part of the nose. It has two parts, the upper part and the lower part. This upper part is surrounded by a bony wall, whereas the lower part is surrounded by a fibrocartilaginous plate. The main function of the eustachian tube is maintain airway passage between the middle ear and the atmosphere. The air pressure on both sides of tympanic membrane is controlled by this structure which is called as eustachian tube. So this is the eustachian tube which starts from the anterior wall of the middle ear, which is extending to the posterior part of the nose. So the major function of this structure is to maintain air pressure. Now we'll have a quick recap about today's session. So first we discussed about middle ear. What are the structures including in it? So we started with tympanic membrane, and the major function of the tympanic membrane is to vibrate in response to any sound stimulus from the external environment. Next, we discussed about auditory ossicles. We have three auditory ossicles. The first one is malleus, second one is incus, and the third one is stapes. This stapes is the very smallest bone in our body. Next, we discussed about auditory muscles. So in auditory muscles, there are two muscles. The first one is tensor tympani and the other one is stapedius muscle. Then we learnt about what is eustachian tube, and the major function of this tube is to maintain air pressure. We have come to the end of today's session. For more videos regarding the structure and function of the ear, keep watching. Thank you.